Hello and welcome to a special episode of Diegetic Advancement. I'm Riley, and today we're going to be looking at creating a fantasy hex map based off real terrain. I'm a JS engineer by trade, and a comment from Todd over at Hexpress on his Discord kind of gave me some inspiration to play around with this. So um, I'm going to kind of try and speed through this. It's not a long process, but I tend to blather on, so let's see how we go. What we're looking at here is a free and open source piece of software called QGIS. It's a mapping software. It's available for download on qgis.org. If you are going to follow along, once that's downloaded, it should roughly look like this once it's open. First step that we need to do is pick somewhere interesting on the Earth. So a little tool that we can use to help us do that is if we go plugins, manage and install. It's going to search for a bit. We can go quick map services. Click on that. You'll have an install button down here. I've already installed it. And then we go web, quick map services. You won't see these. Go settings, more services, and get contributed pack. I think that'll take a moment to download. Hit save. Then you can come back and you'll get these. This is just a list of different maps that we can use. I'm going to go Esri satellite. Gives me a nice pretty picture of the Earth. I'm going to zoom in here. It's got some interesting terrain. It's got some water, different elevations and different vegetation. It's not terribly the most interesting, but it's good enough for demonstration purposes. Once we've zoomed in and found somewhere interesting, we need to create a boundary to start the process. So I'm going to go to layer, create layer, new shapefile layer, and I'm going to put this in. I'm going to call it boundary dot shape geometry type polygon and click OK. Let's give us a layer down here. We select that, and we need to start editing to draw. If you don't see this editing toolbar, pencil, we can go to view, toolbars, and digitizer. Toggle that on. We want to start editing, add a polygon feature, and draw 4 points. It doesn't have to be 4, but square or rectangle maps make plenty of sense. So 4, and it doesn't have to be a perfect rectangle. Once you've drawn your 4, right click. You can put something in there, it doesn't matter. And there we go. Hit save and stop editing. Now we can create a hex grid. Processing toolbox. If you don't see that, you go processing toolbox. Search for create grid, and under vector creation, it's the create grid tool. First thing we want to do is set our grid type to hexagon. And then we can set our hexagon size. If you don't see meters here, it's because your projection is different. So you might have it like this, and you have degrees, which is not terribly intuitive. So just change that to WGS84, 3857 there, and we can select miles. It makes sense to make 6 mile hexes. You don't need to make them 6 miles even if you're using 6 mile hexes in game. You could shrink these down or boost them up, but I'll just keep them 6 miles, and this is a pretty small area, which would be nice. And then we need to set a grid. So again, same location, grid.shape, and go run. Oh, I didn't set my grid extent. Okay, triple dots, use layer extent and boundary. That's why we created the boundary. And run. There we go. Now we've got a bunch of hexes. Cool. Close that. Toggle our boundary off on our layer list. Here we go. Now we need to populate these hexes with some data so that we can classify them, right? I'm going to use 2 data sets to do this. I'm going to use an elevation data set and a vegetation data set. Both of these are freely available for basically, I believe, the entire globe, so you can pick literally anywhere and it'll be okay. The first one, both of these you're going to need to create accounts for. There's a Earth data, NASA registration. That's where we're going to get our elevation data. And Earth Explorer, USGS, will also require a login. Once you're registered for both of those, we can get our elevation data through a plugin, which is pretty handy. We go plugins, manage, and SRTM downloader. This is what we want. Again, install. Firstly, let's right click on our grid and zoom to layer and go plugins, SRTM downloader, SRTM downloader. Let's set canvas extent. A temporary location is fine, but let's check in there because why not? And when we hit download, it's going to prompt us for a username and password. So download, and there's a prompt that you can't see. I'm not going to show it. It's just prompting for username and password. Go okay. That will start to download. I've had this happen where some of them fail to download. Just hit download again, and it will every attempt. But there we go. We get our individual layers, which we don't need. Right click and remove, because it gives us this nice elevation data set all combined. Okay, now we need to classify this grid to say what elevation is in each grid square. We can do that by going and searching zonal statistics in our processing toolbox under raster analysis. We select our elevation dataset and our grid, and let's say elev for elevation. And what statistics do we want? We want maximum. You can play around with different types of this to get more interesting results maybe, but maximum is absolutely fine. So let's just chuck in an underscore. So we get elev underscore max and go run. Cool. Now if I right click and go attribute table, you can see each of these hexes has a maximum elevation. Okay, the next one we can do is vegetation. There's a handy tool. There's no plugin for this, so we're gonna have to go to the website. We can use the boundary though to help us search. So let's right click, export and save features as, and set a format to KML. We will need to grab this and go boundary KML. Go okay. And let's jump over to our Earth Explorer, and I believe you click KML shape file upload, select file, and boundary.kml. You go open, and there we go. That's our search area. Now we want to go datasets, and we want Landsat 8. Landsat 8. Sorry, I've got a previous selection. Landsat 8, level 2. There we go. That'll tick that on. Now we can click results. So we'll do a search. What we're looking for is an image that says LC08, not 09, that has low or no cloud cover and covers our bounding box. This one looks pretty good from a thumbnail. If we click the footprint, there we go. There's a little bit clipped off. That's not going to matter in our case. So that is good enough for me. Click download. Now we just want two. There's a lot of files here. We just need two of them. The red and the infrared bands of this satellite image. So if we go product options, let's scroll down. We need LC08. SR is surface reflectance, and then B is the bands. Band 4 and band 5. Band 4 is red. Band 5 is infrared. You can click on these and download. I've already got them downloaded there. Not terribly large, but it's a bit slow, this website. So once they are downloaded, though, we can jump back across and drag those files in from your download location. Okay, what we need to do is create a NDVI, which is again, I always forget the acronym, NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. This is a pretty handy graphic. We're going to get a value between -1 and 1, and it kind of tells us how healthy the plants are. You monitor it over time, but also just tells you if there's vegetation in an area. So that's what we're going to do. The way we calculate that is by taking the red and infrared bands and doing a little bit of math on them. So with those in, we go raster calculator. Now I'm going to start with a bracket. Double click our bound 5 image. We're going to take away our red from that and then divide that by the sum of them. Basic idea is that healthy plants don't have red in them, they're green. So that's why we use the red. And go, need to, again, set a file location for this, ndvi. Okay. That's going to think about it for a bit, and then create our ndvi image. And you can see we've got range values ranging from -0.3 to 0.54. Should range from -1 to 1, but you actually need those values to exist. So, right, like if you got a picture of just lush forest, it would be all high values. There wouldn't be any negatives. Right? So that is perfect, exactly what we expect. Now we can run our zonal statistics again. Some ndvi grid again, and we can say veg underscore, and again we're just going to use a max. Max is good enough. Okay, and run. Okay, let's turn everything else off except for our grid. Again, attribute table. Now we can see our veg value. Now we can start to classify these into terrain types. I'm going to do some fairly basic things here. You could get a little bit more complicated, but first I'm just going to duplicate this a couple of times just for some visualization. And I'll rename this one to veg. And I'll rename this one to elef. Turn this one on. Let's start at looking at our veg data. We right click, go properties, and go symbology. I want to classify this into 3 separate groups. I'm going to desert, plains, forest. So graduated value, I want my veg. Let's set this to a nice green. Color ramp and equal. Set this to natural breaks and 3. And hit apply. Now we can see we've got desert, plains, and forest. Right, at a simple level. You can play around with these values. You could change the equal counts to make them sort of, number of X's should be the same. Pre-breaks, I don't know what that does exactly. You can play with that, or you can actually individually change these values. Actually, I think there's probably too much desert here. That looks better. Does it make sense? It's desert and forest. Who cares? Okay, that's our vegetation. Now we can do the same for elevation. Go right click properties, graduated. This time for the value, set elev max. And let's just set a nice green. And natural breaks. This time I'm going to have 4 because I want a water value. So this low values would be water. It's too much. So if we double click on the values, I can change this. Let's just change this to 80. Go apply. Now I've got a river system running out into the ocean, perhaps. Maybe a lake here. Perfect. I've got mountains, I've got hills, and I've got flat. Fantastic. Let's hit apply. Okay. Now we need to turn this into terrain. So let's turn our grid back on. We go right click, properties. Instead of graduated, we can set rule based. And so this is going to let us classify data. So let's start by classifying water. My filter is going to be elev max is less than 80. Less than or equal to 80. That's what we set in our elevation as a reference. Let's go down and I can set this to a blue. Okay, and apply. Now we've got our water. We can take the combination of elevation and vegetation. The desert, I'm going to say, is all the flat terrain. So greater than 80 and less than our hilly terrain, right, which is 377. But if it's desert, then it also means that our vegetation is low, so 0.2. So veg max less than or equal to 0.2. And our desert is going to be that shade of yellow. Okay, apply. Now, because we've got that, I can do this and say all our flat terrain that is veg greater than that, but not quite forest. So veg max is less than 0.4. Again, that's what we've set, less than or equal to 0.4. We'll set this to a nice light green. So let's call this plains, grassland, whatever you want to call it. There we go. And copy and paste that one last time into forest, let's say. And in this time, veg max is just going to be greater than 0.4. And we'll set this to a nice dark green. Okay, apply. Yeah, I've actually got very little flat forest. You can then do exactly the same thing, but for hills. So hills are going to be cases where elevation is greater than our 377, but not quite as big as our mountains. So 73. Set this to like a browny orange. That. Copy, paste. Mountains are everything that is greater than 73, right? And I've got a quote there. Hit apply. I need to style this differently. Make this a proper dark brown. And there we go. There we have it. We have desert, plains, water, little bits of forest, hills, and a mountain range. Very interesting terrain for play. With this desert to the west, we've got this river that sort of bisects these two bits of land. We've got a mountain pass here. We can get a little bit more specific. You know, obviously there's a lot of forest up on these hills and mountains, especially if we return to our original image. You can see how lush these mountains are compared to the rest of the terrain. I don't even know if you'd count these as mountains. They're probably not very high. But there you go. Doesn't look great, but I'll pause the video here and apply some additional symbology, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Started to do this, so let's just show you how to finish this off. So last thing I need to do is mountains. So instead of this fill and simple fill, change the symbol layer type to a centroid fill. It's going to put a marker in the center. Instead of a simple marker, let's change this to a raster image. And we can go down here to our triple dots to pick an image. Go. This is the HCoral toolbox that I've purchased. They send out digital files. It's pretty handy. Mountains. And one thing I don't like is the mountains, that they're all ice covered. I don't know if they really match the rest of the terrain. I mean, they're beautiful, but it'd be nice to have. And I feel like these are, especially because they've got the cold border. I don't really understand, but whatever. Let's check those in. You have to play around with the size, but 35 seems to be working for these. And hit apply. And there you go. We have a hex map again. Nice river rolling through. A little bit of forest. Probably not enough interesting forest. So you probably want to go through and handpick some stuff and play with these values a little bit more to get it nice. This isn't a terribly interesting part of the world geographically either. So, I mean, there is no real forest here, so that's why there's very few forests. But it's kind of interesting. Again, mountain pass, there's crossing here, desert, uh, full of adventure, I think. What else could you do? So we got our hexes. Again, you could, as I said, you fiddle around with these, map different types of terrain. It's going to heavily depend on your game system and how hex terrain works and what types of terrain are there. You work out more complicated sets of terrain here and different rules for them. But you could also add non-hex terrain on top. Right? So if we jump across to a naturalearthdata.com and go back to downloads, they have a bunch of very large scale data for the world. So let's look at large scale rather than this is even smaller, but sorry, I should say very small scale. That's the thing I get confused about a lot. Okay, cultural and physical. And let's look at the layers here. There are maybe better data sets available, but again, this is free worldwide coverage, so it's pretty good. Boundaries, cultural boundaries. So we could look here and grab, let's say, counties. You grab this, plop that over our hexes, and you can start to say, well, this belongs to this kingdom, and this belongs to that kingdom. Like, suburb data, things like that. You could overlay and start to classify. Back up. Populated places. You can just place cities and towns where they actually exist. Change their names if you want, or use their real names. Roads. Use that. You're probably going to have to trim quite a bit if you want to use fantasy, right? To be honest, maybe railroads as a placement for roads would be better. Right, that's really going to show your trade network, which is kind of how roads developed medieval, I guess. But you can use that and just plop that over your hexes and say, there's roads here. I don't think there's anything else in cultural. And if we jump over to physical, though, one, there's a coastline. You could use that for actually determining whether something's a lake or an ocean. But you've also got rivers and lakes. Again, just plop those over the top of your hexes and you could say rivers run here. Or again, you can use these lakes to say where these lakes intersect with these hexes. You just turn them into lake hexes, right? So I think with that, I will leave you there. Hopefully this is interesting. If you want to see more, if you got any tips for different hex terrains and things like that, or different data sets, things like that you think could be useful, let me know, and I will endeavor to put out another video showcasing that. Are there any interesting places in the world that you might like to see? Yeah, oh god. Yeah, don't zoom out. There we go. Australia's not terribly interesting geographically, but you just zoom in there, draw your bounding box around that, run the same thing. You've got a cool campaign, right? Okay, that's it. I thank you very much for watching. If you made it all the way through, details for everything that I've kind of showcased here will be in the video description, and bye for now.